Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Dr. Eric Blacknall. Of course, you can call me Doc. The name of this channel is Practical Dreamers Change the World. I truly believe that. I had a dream last night, and in the dream, there were two books that I was meant to discuss, or I was having a discussion with this large audience with. There were two books that were written in the 1950s. The first one is called Black Bourgeoisie, The Rise of the New Middle Class. This is by E. Franklin Frazier. It was written in 1957. The other book in the dream was The Measure of a Man by the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. This was written 2 years later in 1959. So in these two books, the discussion that I was having with this audience was, what's the responsibility of the community to understand what's taking place? Now, the ideas that I found from these two books were interesting because I'm like, that's an interesting convergence of text for me. So Dr. King is having a discussion about what should a man do in order to lead. He, of course, was interested in leadership citizenry. And for him, it was simple. There was three things that a man needs to do to measure up. First, that man needs to know and love himself. Sounds easy, but he made this analysis that while it sounds easy, the difficulty of it is to know who you are based on what family you were born in, based on the friends that you not only had in the past, but have in the present time, based on the information that you're reading, and how you're challenging yourself to be greater. So he said, first, know yourself. Then the second thing that Dr. King talked about was loving your neighbor. By knowing your neighbor and accepting your neighbor for who they are. Many people think neighbor and they convince themselves that it could be the person who lives next door to you. But when I think about neighbor as the person who lays right in the bed next to me, who sleeps in the room next to me, who was born into my family. Those are my neighbors also. And the work that it takes to get to know them. Then he talked about always rising up to reach the highest heights, which means intermingling with God. And he said you could not do those things separately. They were all a oneness, or as he refers to it, as isness. In order to be fully human, to be fully who you are, you know yourself, love your neighbor, and reach to God. And then it's interesting because then it fell into, well, why would the other book be? Why is there Black Bourgeoisie in the same dream as the text written by Dr. King? The Measure of a Man. I didn't get it. Then I started rereading my notes and I'm like, oh my goodness. What was being said in my dream is that Eric, sometimes I call myself Eric, sometimes I call myself Doc, both my name. It seems to be that what's happening in contemporary society, because I argue often with the pundits on television who seem to dictate the experience of the larger community. So often there's this slice of community. There's the black community, there's the white community, there's the religious communities, okay? And we notice that Dr. King is like, do you know yourself? So black community, do you know yourself? Do you know that you have a long history before slavery? Do you know that there were always white people that were willing to help black people overcome obstacles all over the world? And white people, do you know there were always black people that were willing to teach you things that you would not have known without your true collaboration with black people? Do you know that Muslims and Jewish and Christian people have fought side by side, have intermingled in marriages, etc.? We've always been true neighbors and friends. But the thing that was interesting in the Black Bourgeoisie is they talk about who gets leadership position and what kinds of ways they talk about their isness. So how do I talk about myself? You'll notice that a lot of the black pundits, when they're talking about the black community, that they imply because they're black, they're representative of the whole community. E. Franklin Frazier would argue, be careful with that, because a lot of the people who will be used to be representative of the larger community can't be. So artists tend to be the ones who they're bringing on television. Artists, athletes, and that's it. So you're an entertainer, you're an artist, and you're an athlete. You're being representative of the black community. as if that's the only thing we're capable of being. And that's very interesting. He made the argument that, he being E. Franklin Frazier, made the argument that that's dangerous. We can't have people who have not had years of study, scholars who are the most undervalued in the larger community, black, white, or religious community. Scholars tend to be undervalued. Need to be the ones in the forefront having discussions about isness. Read that book by Dr. King. I think you'll enjoy it. So I woke up this morning and that was on my brain. I thought, share it. Let's see if there's anybody who's going to read the book, so maybe get back to me and we can have a discussion about the importance of this new middle class, which is representative of the greater whole of the community and what impact they're having on the community. Remember, television shows are watched by millions of people all over the world. I looked at stock in Viacom, which is very affordable, by the way. Viacom owns BET, MTV, Disney channels, and in 176 different countries. So every time someone gets on television on one of these channels that are controlled by Viacom, who has sports networks, they have different children's networks, they own cartoon networks, all of that are under the umbrella. So that means that the image of a particular group is sent out to the world, and it's dangerous to have people give their opinion, and their opinion is supposed to be representative of the larger group, and the larger group never gets an opportunity to give their opinion. Well, that's my thought for the day. Peace.